I have 5:59. Well, first, let me make sure you can hear me okay. Testing. Okay, thanks, Elliot. And can you see me and the PowerPoint? Or just me? Or just the PowerPoint? I'm least important of the two.
We can see you and the PowerPoint.
Perfect. All righty. Well, let's just wait a minute or two as people log on. But so far, so good in the class. We're 1 week into it, and we have a little bit of a flavor for how this might work and how I sort of approach this. There's no assignments per se until early February or so. So just sort of getting the rhythm from each other. Any questions so far? Comments?
I think we have a lot of good reading to do.
Oh, good. Have you started?
Yes.
What did you read the article?
Yes, I'm reading it again for the second time. It's kind of deep.
Yep.
But very good.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, I have an advantage in that I've probably read that article 15 times or more, and I also am able to present it in class and discuss it, and there is just a lot to it. And so the first time I read it versus where I'm at now with it, and with so many other readings and articles, I get more and more out of it as we go.
Dr. Duxler, I'm really enjoying the textbook. Those first 3 chapters were very interesting.
Oh,
I
good.
really enjoyed how she wrote it.
Mm-hmm.
I liked that it was more conversational and less stuffy than a lot of textbooks. And also, come on, brain. Oh, I started listening to the Vanderkolk book. And I'm listening, actually, Sheree and I were talking about that last night. She's reading it, and I'm listening to it on Audible on my drive to and from the Springs.
Well, so. Elliot, you have been complimentary as we go, and of course, I always appreciate it. But any kind of feedback is welcome through the spectrum, so to speak. But I just it's clear just your enthusiasm for the course or for the information, and the emails you've had sent and comments that you have made, and reading ahead of the syllabus, all I think indicates just your dedication to this.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So today we'll go maybe 2 hours, give or take 5 minutes or so. I'll know how close to the second hour we'll need once we get to break. We'll break on the hour for maybe 10 minutes or so. And that should get us to 8 o'clock my time, 7 o'clock your time. There'll be nothing further for class this week. In the future, and maybe as early as next week, we'll probably go 90 minutes at most. And then there'll be a video. There will be a video that's just excellent. It's from Dan Siegel, psychiatrist out of UCLA. And so next week, we'll meet as a class for 90 minutes, then you watch the video on your own and just make some comments, and that will fill our class time. As we get a little closer to our the assignment in February, I'll start talking about it, but I prefer not to, unless you have a specific question, sort of get into it now. And we have two from Wichita joining us. And I can't see everybody, so I don't know who's all here. And if I start monkeying around with this, next thing I know, I might be on CNN News or something unintentionally. So let me also sort of touch on what I mentioned last week is I'm not skilled enough at this yet to check the chat questions as we're interacting. So I'd much prefer just to ask questions and interrupt me at any time. And don't necessarily have to raise your hand and me call on you, because I can't see all of you at once. So just blurt it out. It's fine. Feel free to make comments on the chat, because I will read it over break. And so if there's anything that can wait, or elaboration or whatever, please feel free to use the chat in that way. And unfortunately, a lot of this course is going to be geared to helping you become happier. And that's going to be a fair amount of this, your homework, is how to have greater well-being, greater sense of balance and happiness and other things. So sorry that we have to emphasize that kind of thing instead of the traditional homework of going into the literature and analyzing articles, and we'll have a little bit of that. But I'm going to start with part of the reason we find it as necessary to traditionally get all our information from books and articles and professors, because there's a lot of wisdom among us. And so I quoted some of your comments on the exercises of noticing. So most of you contributed to it. Those of you who didn't, maybe you forgot or whatever, I get it. There's no necessarily point value to it. I do pay attention to who participates in this. Appreciate that. But I wanted to maybe for the next, I don't know, 20, 25 minutes, I want to, there's an epistemology, means a fancy word for how we take in knowledge, how we learn. And one way we learn is to read books. Another way we learn is to hear lectures. The profound way we learn, and it is not valued enough, is to contemplate, to ponder, to dwell in. So I'd like to do that. I'm going to just read one at a time. Some of your comments or reflections when I asked you just to notice your mind. And first, my mind constantly and automatically drifts to thoughts of what I need to do. And maybe you wrote this, or maybe you're not sure if this is what you wrote, because it describes all of us. My mind constantly and automatically drifts to thoughts of what I need to do. My mind is on a constant rotation of lists. Several outgoing lists exist in my mind that consist of everything imaginable, and then mostly, and then on and on and on. Another, I'm consumed by things I need to buy, appointments that need to be made, household chores, projects, families, activities, and work and school and assignments. Consumed. Almost from the very second we wake up to the moment we go to bed, we're competing. Our attention is being competing in many different directions. To be consumed throughout the day is what how most of us live our lives. And we're so used to it, we don't even know it. And how can you be at your very best if you're consumed by all these other things? Another, I've noticed that my mind always refers to my morality. Am I doing the right thing at the moment? What will God say about my actions? I can relate to all of these, of course, but that we judge ourselves, constantly judging ourselves. Am I doing the right thing at the moment? Well, if you ask yourself that, you're not in the moment, you're evaluating yourself. And not only that, you add God into it. And what is he thinking? And so it's almost as if there's a constant evaluator or multiple evaluators. And when that happens, my guess is most of the time, you're going to be critical. Oh, I could have done better. I did this, but I should have done that. Yes. I've been noticing this week when I feel unsafe, it tends to happen when I'm under stress. And I will contend that our mind stresses us continually. So used to it, again, we don't notice it until it really overflows. But we are ramped up more than we know. There's exceptions. It's not every moment, but it's a lot. Another, I notice that I automatically start thinking about things in the past or memories. These are so profound. They may not seem like it is starting on a whole new path of walking on this planet. but you have to notice it first. You have to, and keep noticing it. Some of you had sort of solutions to this, or wrote about ways that you can counter these automatic thinking, but that will be for another day. How to fix it, how to make it better. For now, the most important thing by far is to be clear and clearer how your mind has a mind of its own, how it works, how it leads to a lot of suffering on a daily basis. If we don't notice, we're not aware of. What else? When I'm not paying attention to what I'm thinking, I have unsettled feelings. Paying attention, we'll talk about that in a little bit as we go. But the key is attention. Where do you put your attention? How do you put your attention in the present versus letting your mind dictate where your attention goes? Those are questions that we have some answers to, actually. It was a little difficult for me because I was triggered on multiple occasions regarding my trauma. Several of you shared, and this is the third or fourth time I'm teaching this course. And so you are not so different from anybody else in subsequent courses, but having some traumas, some maybe significant traumas that you're in the process of working out, dealing with, and oops. And when we're triggered, the unsettling thing about being triggered is that it can come out of nowhere. And then we're into the fear and painful feelings and sensations that happen when we're triggered. So what most of us who by default will begin to reduce our world so we can be triggered less and less. And by reducing our world, we begin to close off more and more. And we constrict. So it's trigger. I like that term. I think it fits. Triggered, that something else in our thoughts or in our current present environment reminds us, triggers us to something back ago that wasn't so pleasant. You don't have to be have trauma to be triggered. I'm almost anxious about everything that needs to be done. There is rarely a feeling of accomplishment or completion. This is brilliant, absolute brilliance. To see that even if we do feel good about it and somehow manage to accomplish something, the next minute something else will come up. And previous slide, someone wrote that I'm constantly evaluating myself. morally. And furthermore, what God might think of me on top of that. And so a lot of energy, a lot of our life is consumed by this day in, day out, week in, week out, month, year in, year out, decade after decade. And then maybe on our deathbed, we look back and we say, oh my God, did I waste so much of my life worrying and evaluating and judging? And it didn't amount to a hill of beans. And that is tragic in the sense it's too late in this life anyways. Any thoughts or comments?
My name is Ray. Sorry, I wasn't here last
Oh,
class.
yeah.
I'm from the Wichita group, and I wasn't able to participate in this because I'm not on campus yet because I had this crazy electronic issue that I'm figuring out. And I've taken a couple of courses from Duxler before, so I really like how he talks about presence. And I think a big thing is that I've had a lot of these thoughts before. Definitely in the fact that, I think one thing that we constantly do is like, we talk about how like, our minds are so driven to fix it, that we're not focused on, presence and like being in the moment and, and letting things just kind of roll off of our backs like water. And so a lot of the times, finding the solution is just going to cause more suffering.
Yes. Yes, because we usually let our mind try to solve the problem, and the mind needs to create problems. And so part of this, and if you remember the slide last week where I said 85% counterproductive of the mind, 15% very constructive, to begin to discern when you need your mind. Your mind can do amazing things. We can send somebody to the moon. We can build cars and microwaves and solve problems. And how to use our mind when it's at its best and most constructive, and then go allow other ways, information, knowledge, wisdom to come in. And there's a little ethereal that come in that's not of the mind. So I'll get into this as we go. And I'm going to use a lot of neuroscience that undergirds this. So other questions, comments, thoughts, reflection? This is where I wish we were in class, but together. This is close second, I think. Carl Menninger, one of the best, or I think one of my, I'll speak to myself, one of my favorite American psychiatrists. He's passed away, I think maybe 30 years ago. He started Menninger's Clinic in Topeka, Kansas. Very, very famous. That's where John Bowlby came out of, where he did his work. Menninger's 20 years ago, and I might have covered some of this in the first class. I can't quite remember, but bears repeating. Anyways, Carl Menninger operated on a different level in terms of understanding the human condition. So one of my favorite quotes of his says, "It is difficult to give children a sense of security if you don't have it yourself. If you have it, they will catch it from you." What does that mean to you? What do you think he's trying to convey?
I think just like with anything, I mean, we're our kids' biggest role models. So if they see that you have a sense of security and that you are safe in your own space, that they can emulate that same feeling.
Yes. The other piece, and we'll get into this with the video I'm going to have you watch next week, is it gets communicated unconsciously, one to the other. So we're talking about a child here, and then John Bowlby talks about an infant. Infants don't use words like adults do. And so what we're learning is most of the important things we communicate to somebody else is not by words. And it has to do more with feelings and emotions than we can imagine. So the important piece from Menninger's is, if you will have it, they will catch it from you. If you want to help heal your client, then be in position to cultivate your own healing. Instead of trying to come up with technique, or how do I solve this problem, or how do I make this better, the power of attunement, being connected, being in the presence of another, is the seat of where healing begins.
Now that you're mentioning that, this is Victoria speaking. Sorry, I'll turn on my camera now. There is a group here in Colorado Springs that's called what is it? Something con Padres, and it's like healing generations. And they talk about how important it is as healers to heal ourselves. You know, if we can't pass something that we ourselves don't have.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's in alignment with what you're saying here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we are in this, we are blessed in this work that when you help facilitate someone else's healing, it heals you as well. Both people heal in that kind of dynamic. I'll talk more some other time about, well, what do you mean by healing? Well, I'll talk a little bit about it when we progress here, actually today, because we can quantify it. We know what healing looks like because we know what a brain looks like when it begins to heal, or if it doesn't. So John Bowlby, the creator of attachment, and let me mention that John Bowlby was like almost every other psychiatrist at the time, in the 40s and 50s, was classically trained in psychoanalysis. And in my opinion, there is some great things that came out of it and some not so great things that came out of it. John Bowlby somehow became fairly disenchanted with this whole idea of psychoanalysis. So he decided, I'm just going to observe. I'm going to notice. And as much as possible with no preconceived ideas, and see what these babies are teaching us. And that is how he began the whole foundation of attachment theory, of the attachment process. By observing, by noticing. Murray Bowen, we won't cover him, but I'm that's what I focus on in the clinical practice classes. He coined family systems. Same thing. He was trained in Freudian psychiatry and became disenchanted and just began to observe families. And out of that, so the idea of just noticing, observing, is a powerful epistemology. You all noticed things in your mind. That I think is this skill, I'll just say skill, that I'm going to hone more and more, just to notice and observe. And if you're consumed by this list or that list, or evaluating yourself, or how it will compromise what you notice. So John Bowlby, what cannot be communicated within the mother cannot be communicated to the infant. To me, I think it is a different way of saying the same thing. John Fasha, PhD, and we'll get into resilience a little bit. The roots of resilience are to be found in the sense of being understood by and existing in the mind and heart of a loving, attuned other. So the focus today is going to be on resilience, what it is, how it works, and how we can become more resilient. Van der Kolk. Social support is a biological necessity, not an option, and this reality should be the backbone of all prevention and treatment. It is social support, relationships between two people, two or more people, but particularly two people. And we all have relationships, and most trauma comes from other people doing something to us or not doing something to us, most trauma. It's about the quality of the relationships we have. Okay. So, just end with one more quote. Rick Hansen is an author. He wrote The Buddha's Brain, among many other. He's quite a prolific author, not so much an academic as he is in the sort of just general public. He largely writes, but I came across this quote that I think it sort of wraps this up. And it says, how you feel now will be largely the same way you feel the rest of your life. I am so convinced of that. Unless you become consciously aware of counterproductive processes. That is the starting point. That's what I read some of the quotes from your entries in the discussion section. And I would say that they are largely counterproductive. So first, you have to be consciously aware of it. Neuroscientists know now unequivocally what a happy brain looks like, and thusly knows how to reorganize a brain for increased well-being. When you change your brain, you change your life. So I'm going to go over a little bit, a quick overview of the brain. The only reason I picked this slide is for the picture, not so much the wording here. I think some of it is a little bit dated and not necessarily accurate. But most importantly, I wanted to, I like the color-coded coding of the triune brain. So the red part here, reptilian brain, maybe it was sometimes referred to, but it is the brain stem, and the lowest parts, well, here's the cerebellum here, but it is fully functional part of our brain when we're born. It has very little learning capacity and largely is in control of all our automatic body functions, digestion and breathing and pumping the blood, all those things. Largely responsible for that. The blue section here is going to be the key to understanding trauma, understanding our automatic negative thinking, and understanding the healing process. So this is the limbic system midbrain. And then, although this whole part here, the white and green, is the cortex. It's called the neocortex because it came after, evolutionary wise, these two components. Most specifically, the dark green part here is what I want to focus on today. It's the prefrontal cortex. It's the very last part of our brain to come to evolve. So we're going to talk about the prefrontal cortex here, right behind our eyes and forehead, and the limbic system, the mammalian brain. So some basics about the limbic system. Again, the limbic system is the blue part. First and foremost, what the limbic system does before anything else is what's called pattern match. Is it safe? Is it not safe? The environment. Is it safe? Is it not safe? It is speed of light. It's not conscious. And if it assesses danger, then it activates the lower part of the limbic system and the brainstem, fight, flight, freeze. Automatically. If it pattern matches that it's safe, then it shuts off and then tunes into the higher part of the brain. When we have trauma, which is stored in the limbic system, triggers are the limbic system's way of seeing what is in the environment or in your own bodies potentially dangerous. So it puts you into, when someone is triggered, they have a escalation, internal escalation of anxiety, fear, among other things. So far, so good. Let me just pause for a minute. See if there's any questions or comments. The middle brain reacts, reactivity, reaction. Okay. It's where the attachment response resides. So I was mentioning in class last night, sorry for repeating this, but when an infant is born full term, the first 3 months of their life, we call pre-attachment. They don't have attachment behavior. They don't prefer, it doesn't matter who carries them, Uncle Willie or the nurse or mom. But by 4 or 5 months, there is some what we call drawing a blank on how to pronounce it. I'll get receptivity. No, reciprocal, that's the word. What begins to happen is mother and infant by ages 4, 5, 6 months respond to each other in certain ways, largely unconscious. And it's the language where if mother responds to the internal tension within the baby then begins to develop secure attachment. If the reciprocity is flawed, meaning baby has needs, mother's not picking up on it. So if mother had a flat affect, there's been some research with secure infants. When mother has flat affect, when baby's in distress or even happy, it agitates the baby. They're getting something discordant.
Hey, Dr. Duxler.
Yeah.
Sorry. I remember in Hibsy, something that was really impactful for me, and you may be planning to do this, I don't know, but I would love it if you could show the videos of that stranger experiment. Do you remember the one I'm talking about?
The strange
Where,
situation with Mary Ainsworth?
I think so, because isn't that the one where the baby or the child is left with a stranger?
Yep.
Yeah. Can you show that as well as talking about the monkeys, the baby monkey experiments?
Yep.
You know, can you? Okay, you got it covered. But I would love to see those again.
Yeah, no, that's great, and thank you for that. And even if you're familiar with how attachment evolved, it's worth repeating. Everything from the it was out of the University of Wisconsin. I'm trying to think of his name. He did the monkey experiments, and it's all part of that. And I have videos that sort of help to lay the foundation for what we're talking about. And then on top of that, now we have MRIs and PET scans that we can see how a brain works when it's traumatized versus it's well balanced. Elliot, do you have?
It was Harlow. It was
Harry Harlow. Harry Harlow, and yeah, the monkeys. Yeah, surrogate mother monkeys. Yeah, the power of touch, eye contact. Eye contact is huge. They're doing lots of research on the University of Wisconsin with being able to recognize autistic infants earlier and earlier based on their ability to hold their gaze, their eye gaze. And Mary Ainsworth, who worked with John Bowlby, clearly observed, she observed that mother and infant have eye contact from the point of birth on. And it begins to stimulate the occipital lobe in the back of the brain and helps create secure attachment. If there's not sufficient eye contact, baby's at risk. Limbic system generates, stores strong emotions, and holds traumatic memories. I mentioned last week that strong emotions aren't just negative. They can be, if you're exhilarated or just being waves of strong love and joy, that's part of the limbic system as well. I put the information from the five senses, all goes to the limbic system first. So not only does the limbic system watch for danger in the environment, it also senses danger within you, i.e., if there's feelings that you can't handle consciously, it will protect you from them in ways that aren't healthy. Largely unconscious, Reactions are made with lightning speed. So if I'm not paying attention, if I'm triggered, if I'm anxious, you're in the limbic system. It could be in higher regions. I'm oversimplifying this, but it largely comes here. If you notice, you're in the cortex, prefrontal cortex. So the prefrontal cortex, so I gave the function of the limbic system. Prefrontal cortex is where our focused attention resides consciously. You have to be conscious of it. So if I want to pay attention to this pen, okay, then I consciously put my attention to this pen. Whatever effort that takes, that's where it comes from. Then when your mind begins to drift, it is that you seed, C-E-D-E, your attention to the limbic system. And it will produce all sorts of thoughts that will grab your attention away. It's not even fair how good it is at winning your attention. The less successful it is, the more you can be activated in your prefrontal cortex. The limbic system default mode loses power. And you begin, maybe for the first time in your life, there's a liberation with that. You're no longer imprisoned by this mind machine that mostly spews things that aren't true. Prefrontal cortex, compassion and empathy, big picture problem solving. Limbic system resolves problems or tries to solve problems one way. You're in the prefrontal cortex and you're dealing with issues and problems. It brings in more complexity, more nuance. And then you have compassion and empathy along with it, not to mention creativity. So what we're mostly going to talk about second half today is resilience. What is it? And how do you get more of it? There's always buzzwords in our field. A few years ago, the idea of transparency, management, be totally transparent. I have no idea what that means. I don't even think it's a good thing necessarily, per se. But we just all sort of thought that that's what we should strive for. And so resilience and self-regulation, we banty that about. Who among us don't think it's a good thing? But what is it? How do you see it in yourself? How do you cultivate it in yourself? How do you help another develop it? More reasoning and a sense of well-being. When you're in prefrontal cortex, you're going to be happier. And when you're have a sense of well-being and you're attuned, you communicate it to yourself and it gets communicated to others. You can't communicate it to others if you don't have it yourself. That's the new paradigm that is, I believe, here to stay in our field. It is less about being a master of all the treatment goals and models of what you tell a patient, and that's not unimportant, but it only matters if this other stuff is in place. And so the good news is that we get to benefit from our profession to do it right, and then our loved ones benefit, and our close friends and people around us. And for me, that's how we transform society. Not by skipping ahead and fixing other people. So we know how to activate the prefrontal cortex. We can see it in vivo, and I'll show you videos. When someone is asked to think about troubling things, what seems to light up in their brain versus being focused and attentive in the presence. So noticing, that's all I'm asked to do. So I don't know how to put a grade on it. It's sort of counterproductive. So if you notice 3 things, then you get an A, and 2 things, you get a B. It's, I want to take that out of the, I have a midterm exam and other things that there'll be grades associated, but this kind of stuff, I hope you're motivated on, because there'll be assignments around it, but motivated for the benefit of to you and to others. Observing, to observe. Awareness, curiosity. There has been some research, and again, so many of my courses in the first week or 2 start off the same way, and I can't remember if I mentioned this in this course or another course, but it again bears repeating. Curiosity is one of the most effective ways to stay in your prefrontal cortex, to be curious. And there's been some research talks about IQ, intelligent quotient. We've heard about EQ, emotional quotient. Some say that curiosity quotient should be right up there, to be curious. When I was doing my doctoral research and I was interviewing families, Native American families, there was trepidation. Who is this white guy with a beard from the University of Texas asking them, poking around with questions about their lives? There's been too many people over not only the years, but millennia who come with good intention and leave with something else. But I noticed it began to change their their trust, not all, maybe not even most, but a fair amount, because they saw I was naturally interested. I wanted that they teach me. I wanted to know, as opposed to me telling them how it should be. To be curious will negate judgment. Judgment is limbic system. That's what the limbic system does. Judge. Pretty deep and automatic, including ourselves. It judges ourselves. Acceptance, gratitude, forgiveness. I put forgiveness on the bottom because it's the highest, many will argue, and I agree, it's the highest level of psychological functioning is to forgive self and others. It's not a mental exercise. It's not a decision you make. It is a way of truly letting go of ill will. Now, let me just make a comment here, and then we'll take a break. There's a lot of caveats to this. So if someone, let's say, is in a domestic violence situation, and the perpetrator has been, it's just a cycle, and done a lot of bad things to, let's say in this case, the wife. So you're working with the wife. To me, forgiveness is off the table until she's safe and low risk to no risk of having that person abuse them. So forgiveness can only be done, I believe, in the context of feeling some level of safety. I just want to qualify that. Okay, well, let's take a 10-minute break. I have 7:01. We will break by, so 6:01, your point. We'll break between no later than 7 o'clock your time and 8 o'clock Ray and my time. Okay, and I'll look over the chat, and so I'll see you guys in 10 minutes. Okay, not everybody's back, but just see if there's any comments or questions. I read the chat stuff, so it's mostly around trying to track the presentation, what notes to take. And there's people offering to help other people sort of take in the material. So I think nothing for me directly to comment on it, I think. Any other comments, questions, thoughts, concerns? Sherry had mentioned before we started class today that she had read the article for today for a second time and made a little bit more sense the second time than it did the first. And so I think that's going to be true with a lot of this as we go, particularly if this is the first time you're hearing it. The course itself is really geared towards not having any necessarily previous information about all this. So I want to sort of start on a fairly basic level. If all of you are beyond that, then we can move faster. But otherwise, I particularly in the beginning, just sort of go at this pace. Not still figuring out the recording. So I'll record each of these. I think I figured it out, so I know how to. I think the easiest way is just to put it on YouTube and have a link, and then I'll just post it for you as opposed to any other way. So I'll just do that routinely with each of these lectures or presentations. Any other questions, comments?
I just have a comment. Just with everything that you've been teaching, I think it's just kind of reminds me, with my kids, especially now since I have my son and my daughter, and that, I know you were teaching in the beginning, with some of those quotes that some of those guys were giving. It's like my daughter knows when I'm giving her my full 100% or when she's not. Kids are a lot smarter than what you think. And now that I have my son, it's like she's definitely getting jealous of him, but at the same time, giving her 100% of my time to her, it's like, I think kind of negates a lot of that. But even then, it's like I still feel like she knows when you're at 100 and when you're not, and when you're just kind of just what's the right word? Not giving your 100%, kind of just, like a better word, just half-assing it, and so I don't know. It's just interesting because my child knows when I'm fully present and when I'm not, even though I'm right there. So
I love that comment, Javier, and I have a pretty strong sense that you are a terrific father. And just to comment on what you had mentioned, the fact that you can read your kids when you haven't given them your 100% attention is what good parents do. That's attunement. And frankly, who among us can be 100% attentive to our children every moment? They don't need that. What they will need is a few minutes here, a minute or two there. And that's more than most kids get in a month. And when I have 5 children, 2 sets, and my second set of kids are now 15, 14, and 11. But their mother and I divorced when they were 5, 3, and 1. So we shared custody, and I had a single parent. I still am, but they're older now. And so with 3 little ones, I made it a point to give each of them every day at least a minute or two of my attention. That may not seem like a lot, but I will tell you, it is when you're able to give that pure attention. And what I would specifically do is go down to their eye level, wherever they were. So we were eye to eye, and just focus. And just again, just a little bit here, a little bit there is food for the soul. So last week I had a list of maybe 10 or 12 skills. And for this course, 6 of those 12 is enough. And they do support each other. So self-awareness, self-awareness, self-awareness is where it all begins. It doesn't end there. It just begins there. So my question is, okay, self-awareness, what are you supposed to be self-aware of? What does that mean exactly? And this stuff, self-aware of your mind. Self-aware of your mind and how your body reacts to your mind. Could be that some of us think self-awareness is we're sort of evaluating ourselves and making sure we're at our best all the time. And that could be a small piece of self-awareness, but that if it quickly devolves into somehow conveying you're not good enough, you're not enough in some way, then you're off track. So the self-awareness is the connection between your thoughts and your feelings and emotions. Your feelings and emotions always are in your body. It's the mind, body, brain connection. And so go our thoughts, so go our body. And if we're being triggered, our body is in fight or flight. So resilience, I was going to make this case, but we're one letter off. And that is, I thought, return to silence. It's not quite spelled, maybe it is. I'm not a good speller. Is that how silence is spelled? I don't know, but
There's one too many eyes in resilience.
okay. So let's forget that one too many eyes, and at its root, to be silent or to quiet. Be quiet. Ability to handle reactions, reactivity. It used to be of the client, but it is absolutely self first, then the client. Because if you're reacting, then they're reacting. And if you think you're faking a professional demeanor, and inside you're having all sorts of, I don't want to be here, I don't like this person, whatever that might be, somehow it leaks out. So self-awareness and understanding of how our thoughts drag our bodies. And that's what we call feelings. So we talk about affect modulation, emotional modulation. Those are all new concepts, relatively new concepts in the field of trauma-informed treatment. But it could be just a buzzword again. Makes sense to be able to modulate your own emotions, but what does that mean really, and how do you do it? And de-escalation will follow. And by doing these things, it puts you in a position to be more attuned, accepting, and non-judgmental. So here is another way of presenting this material in this particular draft. The window of tolerance is the same thing as affect modulation, different term. And so hypo zone, we're not in very much. But if we are in it, it's apathy. We don't care. It's part of the negative symptoms of schizophrenia is hypoarousal, just not feeling anything. It's you're demotivated, but let's not worry about that, because that's not something we have to contend with as much as being hyper aroused. So there's optimal arousal. It's when we are regulated, modulated. Once our emotions become too intense, we become aroused, higher arousal. And it is emotional reactivity, defensiveness, racing thoughts, intrusive inner imagery, emotional overwhelm, feeling unself. When we're optimal, experience empathy, more tolerant, we're in the present moment. All these universities and research centers are really coming up with the same kind of conclusions, and they just sort of package it in their own ways. Feel safe. That is a pivotal piece. And again, I want to say it's not only feeling safe with our environment, but feeling safe going inside and being in our body. And there's lots of people where that's not safe, because that's where a lot of the strong feelings reside. And maybe feelings beyond what I can handle. So I'm going to look outward to try to control my world, give away all that power when it's about going inside and feeling safe. And that is one of the first steps in trauma healing. Being able to connect with your body. Our body gives us so much information. If we're not connected, we lose so much of the fullness of life. So we're pretty good when we're hungry, thirsty, tired. The physical stuff. We're not so good with the emotional stuff. And we're almost exclusively pay attention when something's wrong with our body, not when something's right. If we stub our toe, we're not thinking about the other 9 toes that don't hurt. We're thinking about the one that does. Hunger, discomfort. Thirst, discomfort. To be in our bodies with feelings is the road to resilience. To tolerate those feelings, particularly in the presence of another person. That's the power of psychotherapy done well, is getting to a point where you trust your clinical social worker enough, where you can feel anything that comes up, not anything, but more and more things, in the presence of somebody who is safe and that you trust. That's why cognitive behavioral therapy has taken a back seat and it's contraindicated in treating trauma. It's too much in the head. So things like DBT, or what's now called the third wave of cognitive behavior therapy, that includes the body, is critical. Elliot, you said you were reading Van der Kolk's book. What is the title of that book?
The body keeps the score.
Body Keeps the Score.
Yep. It's very, very good, but I've actually found it to be a little bit triggering for some of my own trauma, because like none of it actually directly relates, but he describes he describes how like sensations in the body can feel in such a way that it's like, yep, I got that. I know exactly how that feels. So it's like I'm trying to like sort of process more quickly in my body, like my own stuff that's coming up, so that I can keep listening. And then I'm also using the book as kind of like a grounding thing almost, to be like, nope, I'm not actually in my trauma right now. I'm not in my PTSD moment. I'm listening to a book. So.
Beautiful, beautiful. In that most people, if they're triggered, let's say reading this book, they'll stop reading it or skip over so they're not triggered. And And
Yeah, like that's my urge. Like my initial urge is to like stop reading it. But I know that, you know, like therapy and like feeling my way through my trauma, it's not going to get any better if I don't get to the other end.
that's it. It's certainly okay to skip this or that,
Yeah.
but there's nothing really learned from it. And the other component, you're in therapy, you talk about it with us, maybe some other people, that you have to have those things.
Yeah.
And so as it comes up, to let it come up as opposed to pushing it down.
That's what I'm learning is most important is it feels uncomfortable in the moment, but it's less uncomfortable if you just let yourself feel it and then let the moment pass, you know, like kind of let it come over you. And then you feel better eventually. Eventually it stops. So
That's the work, Elliot, and
mhm,
we can see it play out in the brain.
yeah.
Okay. Talk a little bit about feelings and tie it to resilience. We often will talk about feelings, emotions, and moods interchangeably. And that's okay to the lay person. But for technical purpose, there are three distinctly different dynamics. Feeling is something that's happening in our bodies now, emotional related, let's say emotion, related to the thinking we're having. So it's not that biological feelings per se, thirsty, hungry, tired, but more, as Elliot was talking about, being triggered in something, feelings that we're aware of is the healthy realm. Whatever feeling comes up, to sit with it. And watch it, observe it. Don't judge it. That then begins to release what's prior to been held in the body. You have to bring awareness to it. Feelings usually can last for a few seconds, a few minutes, rarely more than that. As feelings come and go, I put here, it is the seat of resilience. Be able to have the full range of feelings and be able to identify anger, sadness, jealousy, fear, joy, whatever that might be, to be aware of it in your body and watch it and let it go begins to reorganize the brain.
I just want to
Yeah, please.
I just want to say Dr. Brene Brown thinks it's so important. Her new book, Atlas of the Heart, actually has a list of like 86 different feelings. Because if we can't name our feelings, like our worlds are as big as our vocabulary or something like that.
Yes. Yes. I subscribe to that too. What I like, and I've seen this in schools, particularly in elementary schools, but maybe in high schools too, I don't know, is pictures of just a face with different feelings associated. And if a child can't put a word to it, point to the picture. Which one does which face best maybe describe what's in here?
And the crazy thing is that I actually worked at a daycare like that, where we wore like the 5 main faces, like happy, sad, angry, sick, and I think there's one other one. And we wore those faces around our neck on a little keychain, and they like when kids would get like mad about sharing, or like they didn't like the activity we were doing, or even like when they were happy but they couldn't like vocalize it because they were a little shyer. Typically, like when they were talking to us or other kids, like we would prompt them to like, instead of hitting or taking the toy away from another person, like, hey, like, a kid would go, I feel sad, like I want the toy back, can I have the toy back? I'll make sure to give it to you when I'm finished. Like, and so teaching kids like how to, like, that conflict is natural, but also voicing your feelings is natural, because kids have a tendency to either blow up or like or hold it in. And a lot of the time we saw that kids that had been kicked out of a lot of other daycares that came to our daycare, once you give them that voice to voice their feelings and like give it a name or a face, like they could tell you exactly like why they were feeling that way. And it was good for instances where they were hitting or they were throwing things, and you could voice to them like, hey, I feel a little sad, like that we're throwing things at your friends, like, how can I help you, like, not throw things, like, and then they'd calm down a little bit and be like, whoa, like you told me you're sad too, like just creating that level of like communication and grounding.
To be able to communicate what's in here to somebody else. So humans, we have words for that. And by being able to assign a word to what's inside, share it with somebody else who receives it, begins to convey that several things. One is it's important to know what's in here. Two, by communicating that with another person, the reciprocity from their part is to understand you. The roots of resilience are to be found in the sense of being understood by and existing in the mind and heart of a loving, attuned other. So when Javier was talking about being attuned, paying attention to his son or daughter, it means that what they're feeling on the inside, we want to know. It matters, it's important. One of the questions in family of origin work is to reflect on what feelings were allowed or not allowed in your family. Or were emotional feelings even valued? Because if it wasn't, then you have no experience on going inside or even thinking it matters. Yeah, so I don't think we'll get into this class, but how we know a patient is healing from their trauma is tied to some degree with the words they use. If they're operating out of the limbic system, how they'll describe their traumas are more black and white, good and bad, victim, fear. Let's begin to heal, particularly in the Broca area, which is the highest level of language right under the left prefrontal cortex. Your description of words are more nuanced, more sophisticated, more compassionate, and a sense of acceptance. This happened to me. How can I help to make myself and the world a better place as a result of my own experience? And that is a window into the brain healing, how words are used. So, feeling in its pure form, that's where sometimes just a word helps it stay pure. It's a seed of resilience. It becomes emotional when you start telling yourself a story about the feelings. Why did this happen to me again? I can't believe this. Or whatever that might be. Could be that, boy, I'm hopeless. Nothing will ever get better. I've been feeling like this all the time. Or when you're rehashing a feeling that comes up and thinking about it over and over, we call that emotion. This is the beginning of dysfunction. It's when your mind begins to tell a story, a narration about the feeling you had. And this lasts from minutes to days. An example, let's say you're driving to work in the morning and you get pulled over for a speeding ticket. One of my least favorite experiences on my way to work. So it doesn't feel good. So you come to work and it's on your mind. Oh gosh, I wasn't the one who was speeding, or what do I do with my insurance, or I can't believe this happened, or what do I tell my husband, wife, brother, sister, whatever that might be. You're telling a story. So that feeling begins to magnify. It doesn't serve any purpose other than to consume us. And it takes effort. So let's say we see a patient who comes in. We're gonna have to work harder. Okay, let me get this out of my mind and concentrate on the patient, let's say, but it'll seep through here and there. And then the patient leaves and then it comes back again. Whatever that, I'm just using this as an example. And it compromises us. And we think that either it's necessary to think about it over and over again, or there's not a darn thing we can do about it. So we suffer. And if you observe, it has no real benefit. And so what we're learning in this field is this: to have a feeling and let it go. Have a feeling and let it go. And you start with easy stuff. You stub your toe, let's say, and I'm a jerk, I'm late, whatever. Okay, well, let me not give attention to condemning myself. Okay, something small. You practice. The problem with healing is it's incremental and slow. And you can begin to practice this, and some days better than others. And then an emotional tidal wave overwhelms you, and it feels like, what's the use? And you, that's why we as clinicians have to help people understand it is a slow process. But staying with it as much as possible, you will begin to see for yourself. This is a little bit different than before, and that, and this, and that, and more over time. Mood in the old DSM, and the DSM-3 and the DSM-4, all versions, was called mood disorders. Depression was mood disorder. Mood is an emotion you're stuck in for days or weeks. And it's the least healthy, most problematic. And in the DSM, it says depression, let's say dysthymia, is 50% of the time you're in depressed mood. So it doesn't mean it's 100% all the time. You get a little relief from it, then you go back. A little bit of relief, go back. And not only is it hell on you, but people around you. In the Star Trek, I'm not a Trekkie, I'm not a big science fiction person, but I am aware that in Star Trek, when they were under attack or in some sort of crisis, they went to Dr. Spock to guide them because he had no emotion. It was bred out of him on his planet. He had no emotion. So he was able to think most clearly in times of crisis. On the other hand, and I've seen snippets of this, if there's a love affair or problems between two people in a relationship, whatever to go to Spock, he is out of his realm. He has no idea what to do because you need some empathy. Empathy means I have a feeling, some idea of what it feels like to be them. So the healthy is to balance our mind, our thoughts, and our feelings, to be aware that we're going around and around about anything. We'll have that self-awareness that it is counterproductive. You're largely saying, unless you become consciously aware of counterproductive process. Neuroscientists know unequivocally about this. Okay, and then lastly, I want to introduce this. And people in Wichita have seen this before. I just think it's very helpful in understanding issues. Let's skip the unconscious for now and go to underlying patterns. Underlying patterns is where the change, true change happens. That we have some patterns that work for us, and we have some patterns that are, by definition, patterns are automatic responses, largely in the limbic system. Okay. Largely in the limbic system. And what they do is create presenting problems. So let's say where we fear, the underlying pattern is that I will sabotage a relationship because my fear is that somebody will eventually reject me. So I'm going to reject them first. It's a pattern. Up here, they'll come to you and say, maybe blame themselves or blame the other person, whatever happened, that just happened, that they're coming to you, as opposed to seeing this pattern over time. So limbic system are patterns. And if that's not quite clear to you, that's fine. That's not a major point at this time, but just to get to here. And so the work then becomes being aware of sensations in your body. That's essentially what it is. Sensations in your body. And as Elliot was saying, to let them arise. Just let them arise. Feel them. And be aware of, Jesus said to be vigilant, the house for evil to come in. Not for, be aware of not letting thoughts come in that will tell a story of you're bad, someone else is bad, this always will happen to you, why does this happen to you? Rehashing things, all the things that the mind does. Okay. That is about the slides I want to cover for today. Thoughts or questions? Comments? One of the things, particularly in the beginning of the semester, is it's frequent when I ask for comments, there's not much. And I think that in part it has to do with you're hearing all this for the first time, you're trying to make sense out of it, you're trying to have it sink in, and you're not at a point of really digesting it and then saying, you know, well, how does it work in this situation? Or that's, you're not, it's just trying to take it all in. So if there's no comments, there's no comments. If you have comments later, please just communicate. I think probably the best way is just on Canvas. I know the two Wichita people aren't on Canvas yet, so I'm working on that, but the Colorado people are. So just communicate any kind of question you might have. If you want to, it's so easy to set up a 5 or 10 minute Zoom if there's something you want to talk about or personal experience that you have that's related to this, or just whatever. So I keep that as an open invitation as we go. I don't want to assign anything today other than for sure we're going to talk about the article next week, and then begin to start reading 1 through 3 in the textbook. Okay, so what I'll do then is this is in Canvas, and each PowerPoint, if it's a new one, or if I use one in a given week, I'll assign the date. So there, whatever date today is, I know it's January 19th. It's January 19th, and then resilience and something. So you can reference that. Then give me a couple days on the videos, and I'll go ahead and YouTube it for you all. And then I took notes about adding some stuff about Harry Harlow and some brief videos there. And I'll either post it or I'll show it next week. Because I already have a slide made for that with the videos, take 15-20 minutes. So we'll see. But I think that's enough for today. I'll stay on if anybody has any questions or comments individually, and otherwise I will see you next week. Okay, bye-bye, everybody.
Hi, Dr. Dexler.
Yeah, hi, Victoria.
Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to thank you, because I have decided that Newman is not really a good fit for me and what I'm looking for. But I have decided to stay and continue taking your class just because I really appreciate the introduction to trauma, because I'm kind of afraid of trauma, to be honest. Like in dealing with my clients' trauma and crisis and all of that, those types of things, so I wanted to express my gratitude to you and just tell you thank you, because I'm excited for this class.
Oh, that of course, I take that with mixed blessings, but I think to make that decision is it's not an easy decision to make, but so my guess is it's just clear to you that is not, Newman to continue as maybe not the direction or the kind of education you wanted, but I'm so glad you're at least in this class.
Yeah, and I think I really appreciate you quoting the Bible and having throwing a little Jesus twist on there, because I feel like maybe this is why I was brought to Newman, so that I could gain a better understanding of trauma. I think for me, I really need something that can offer, cultural competence. And I'm not really able to get that with this program, unfortunately. So I'm just really excited to see what else is out there, and I'm really excited to also learn what this semester has to offer. So thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. I appreciate you staying on and expressing that, and being excited, being passionate. That's some of my North Star. If I'm excited about something, means I'm where I'm supposed to be.
That's a good thing then. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. And yeah,
Oh,
I hope that you have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Victoria. I wish the same for you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night to you. Thank you.